We have two distinguished speakers with us today. Who really need no introduction. And as you can tell, I find
they failed to show up.
As you can tell, I find them so distinguished, I'm standing as far away as possible. But our first speaker will be Larry McGill from the Foundation Center. And Larry will talk to you about the findings of the infrastructure report. And our second speaker is Barry Knight from Centris. And Barry will talk about the value of infrastructure, some of the findings from the report, and next steps, what you can do to get involved in this effort.
This picture that looks a little bit like the Alps is the history of the formation of the members of WINGS. So the first period of time from 1924 to 1980 saw the growth of these kinds of associations and support organizations, primarily in North America and in Europe. Between 1980 and 1999, you see a huge amount of global growth taking place, sort of culminating in the formation of the WINGS network in the late 1990s. The majority of organizations were formed after the year 2001, which is indicative of youth and vigor, all right? And this is what the picture looks like today as you look at it across the world. The organizations in North America total about 39. In Europe, they total about 49. And depending on how you define things like the Global South, you have a substantial number of organizations that now are representing other regions of the world besides the old northern states. This is a picture here that shows the relative geographic focus of network participants. As we learned earlier, there are a number of organizations that are global, and they make a subset of the international group there, of which there were about 28. About half of those consider themselves to be global networks. A lot of those globally oriented associations and support organizations are based in the United States and are more than 20 years old, but they are beginning to grow around the world. The regional or subnational organizations, those are largely represented by regional associations in the United States. And then for the most part, the other participants are nationally focused organizations, many of which make up the membership of Daphne as well as the membership of WINGS and other philanthropic associations around the world. There are 93 of the 141 members of WINGS that classify themselves primarily as membership organizations, 45 are support organizations, and 3 indicated that they were primarily network organizations. But this is an interesting statistic, actually, because across all of these organizations, 30 of them actually used the word network as a way of describing the way that they do their work. They were allowed to choose multiple categories to put themselves in. So while this summarizes perhaps the primary orientation or one way of objectively classifying these organizations, many of them are thinking very much along the lines of networking terms. And that is a trend to follow, I think, as time goes by. For the most part, the number of members the membership organizations, I believe there were about 83 membership organizations that responded to the survey, and about half of them had 100 or fewer members, relatively small organizations compared to the other half of the organizations. Some of them have as many as 3,000 members, as you heard. And of course, that means that there's a significant range also in the size of the staffs that work at these associations, ranging from 1 on the low end to more than 150 at the high end. Some of the organizations employ volunteer labor. The mean number of volunteers is about 3. The mean number of staff is about 7. And some of the boards are actually quite extensive. I can't quite get my head around the idea of a board that consists of 65 members, but there is at least one organization that reported a board of that size. Now, the distribution of annual budgets is completely across the board. This breaks down in a very interesting way by the age of the organization. The largest organizations, if you look at the ones that provided us with data, the 15 largest organizations actually had annual budgets that were a little less than $5 million. The 13 most recently formed organizations had budgets of less than $400,000. So there's quite a disparity that probably doesn't necessarily match with the nature of the problems that people are tackling in different parts of the world. The places where these organizations are newest and smallest are by no means facing the smallest or easiest problems. So it's worth thinking about how we support the field, and I think Barry will have a little bit more to say about the issue of support, which drives this research in part, and is why it's so important that we have to build a better understanding of the sector and the infrastructure that serves it. But in general, no matter what the size of the association, the membership organization, on average they provide about 5 of these services. So some of these organizations are doing an awful lot with very little. Now, at that point, I will yield the floor to my colleague Barry, who will enlighten us about what we've learned from all of this.
Yeah, when you pick up the report, you'll find that this is the middle part. This is the kind of meat in the sandwich, giving you the kind of profile of who you are as WINGS network participants. But there are 2 other critical parts of the report which unfortunately I can't address in numbers because it's all about interpretation. He got to do the best bits. So I'm just left with the rest. And one of the things we've done is actually in here we've reviewed the literature on why infrastructure support for philanthropy is important, and drawing on quite an extensive literature, at least as much as we could find, some of it written by Barry Gaberman, who's the founder of WINGS, and it really stands in contradistinction to the understanding about economic infrastructure, which is well understood, but social infrastructure, because it's most likely to be invisible, is much less likely to attract support. And that actually drives us to the conclusion which we actually need to make this field much more visible. And one of the ways in which we feel we can do that is through data and evaluation. There's quite a lot of material that says that actually people don't know what they're getting from infrastructure. We did a survey of 61 foundations about what they got from philanthropy support organizations. And from that, doing a content analysis of what they said, we worked out 4 C's, which we think could become the starting point for a framework for evaluating the work. This is not something that we are doing to you. This is something that we want to work on together. And this essential is a starting point for thinking about these issues. And a critical part of what people said they got out of infrastructure organizations was connections. We heard earlier the stuff on network building, and that's really a critical part. The second thing is capability. The second C is capability, building skills, knowledge, and expertise. And the third C is capacity, which is about resources, essentially building a culture of philanthropy, getting people interested in this sphere, building the capacity to actually do things. And then I really struggled with the 4th C. It was one of those things where I'm sitting there for hours thinking, we've got to get another C for this. And it was a credit. Credit in the sense of building recognition for the work, getting the acceptance of the field, building advocacy and influence for that, the legitimacy of the field with players. And that seemed to us as the sort of starting point for thinking about evaluation. The other thing is to build the communication strategy. Larry alluded to the fact that differences in nomenclature, which we go into in this report, some of the language that we use is deeply alienating and deeply mysterious. We need to find better ways of actually expressing what we're trying to do. The use of this data will enable us to tell stories that at the moment are not being told. And one of the things we'd like to suggest is that you in the room begin to work with the Wings office to begin to tell your stories in better ways than you are at the moment. And in this way, this field will become stronger and less vulnerable to some of the withdrawal of funding that's going on in some parts of the world because people don't see the value of infrastructure. Thank you.